to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I am Charlie Burris. I have Zach. You know what I just did?
What'd you just do?
I had the video on in another browser, and it's playing directly into my ear. I can't. I'm like Hendon Hooker and Akron game, just off to a rough start already. Welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. Charlie Burris, that is my co-host, Zach Ragan, A to Z Sports Tennessee writer, wherever you listen throughout the world. We thank you so much for listening to us. Zach and I talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. And if that sounds like something you want to listen to regularly, go to the A to Z Sports Podcast network feed, Apple, Spotify, and subscribe there. If you subscribe, you won't miss our shows when we drop them on Mondays. And if you subscribe on YouTube, you can see us on Mondays on the live stream that we are doing right now as we speak. Folks are rolling in, tuning in. 4 p.m. Eastern time every Monday during the season here. Me and Zach will be here for the Big Orange Podcast. At Charlie_Burris, at ZachTNT, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville, and A to Z Sports.com for all the stuff that Zach and I write on the internet. And if you feel so inclined, share the show. Go and tell. If you enjoy the show, there's been a lot of people tuning in, telling us they like what we're doing here. Go tell somebody about it. You know what I mean? Tweet it. Tell them in person. Just if you meet somebody random on the street, just, hey, you know what you should do? Big Orange Podcast. Just a suggestion. All right. With the administrative work out of the way, Zach. Tennessee did it. Florida goes down in Neyland Stadium. The Vols, for just the second time in 18 years, beat the Gators. They almost killed me. The Tennessee just can't have it be easy ever, frankly. That's just not a thing that Tennessee ever does. Up by 17, but somehow only won by 5. And Florida had a chance at a Hail Mary right there at the end, but the Vols fight it off. And victory is ours. What a day, Zach. You watched this. We texted the whole time thinking the disaster was about to strike, but we made it. We've had a couple of days to digest now, which is good because I think a lot of people saw me on the show with Crump. I was losing my mind. We took shots of whiskey. It was a whole thing. On the post-game show, the night of the game. That was pretty wild. I've been able to work through what I was feeling, I think I can maybe express myself a little bit better right now, and we'll get into all of it. But Zach, how'd you feel watching those Vols finally vanquish Florida again?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much emotion that goes into watching that game, and you're right. It was all over the place. We were texting back and forth with Austin Stanley that it was rough. I mean, even to that last second, like you said, Tennessee doesn't make it easy. But that's not a bad Florida team like everybody kind of said they were. That team's better than I think people realize. Ventrell Miller, the linebacker, is one of the best defensive players in the nation, and he was everywhere, all over the field. The dude's dealing with a lot of pain and still suited up, didn't just play, but impacted the game. I mean, he knocked out the fumble. Hendon Hooker's big 44-yard run. I mean, he comes all the way across the field to push Hooker out of bounds. Like, he makes that play. Maybe Hooker scores on that play if he doesn't. I know they go on to score later on that drive, but still, he was all over the place. He's a good player. Anthony Richardson's dynamic. It was more like the Anthony Richardson we saw against Utah, his best day passing. And I mean, he's improving. That's what you expect from Anthony Richardson, any quarterback in the SEC like that. So I don't think it was, Tennessee made him look better than he really is. I think he was in his own head a little bit in those Kentucky and South Florida games, worked through some things, much more dynamic against Tennessee. And Florida's going to win some games this year. They're still building that program. Billy Napier's still kind of learning the ropes in the SEC, or as far as how to be a head coach, but it's not a bad team. So the fact that Florida almost came back there wasn't, I didn't look at that as some big negative. You just beat Florida. I mean, that's all that matters in that game, right? Like, you win or you lose. It doesn't matter if it's by 30 or by 3. It hurts just the same. And in fact, some of those close victories hurt even more because you're so close to winning those games. But hey, It's a Monday after beating Florida. It's not an emotion we've had a lot over the last 17 years, but it feels pretty good, I have to say.
It's so nice to just have that off your back, because the truth is, going forward, the games are only going to compound in terms of how important they are.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to start at a certain point, if you continue to win, say you beat LSU, those latter half games against Kentucky and against South Carolina, they're going to start holding the weight of the Sugar Bowl and some things like that, where it's going to be real imperative on you to win. This one sets the stage. We talked about it all last week. This is an unbelievable momentum builder. It was a huge recruiting opportunity. We're going to talk about that too. Everything about this was massive. You had to have this to have the importance on those later games. You don't have this one, those later games don't end up in that same, really big time spot like they just might be if you continue to win. So this is such a giant, what's the word? Trampoline, maybe launching pad. That's the less dorky way to say that. Launching pad for Hypel and this team. It just was so huge. And well, before we get into all of that, I'm going to I'll start out by kind of giving my 1,000-foot view of everything in terms of what this means, because I think that's so important. Because I said after the game, my main emotion was like thankfulness, where I just went, I can't believe that this is what's really happened with this football team. And I want to get into that exact feeling. But before we do, just got to tell everybody about the amazing sponsor that makes this show possible, and that is Superbook Sports. Football is back. Nobody is more excited than your friends at Superbook Sports, and Superbook is bringing Vegas-style wagering to the palm of your hands. And right now, they will match 100% of your first bet up to $1,000, no matter if the bet wins or loses. You do not have to be in Nashville or Knoxville to enjoy football this fall. Visit superbook.com or download the Superbook Tennessee app right now and get in on all the action. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Download that Superbook Sports app, folks. I've been using it since the start of the season. It's great. They have everything you need there to get in your bets. I'm kind of a don't ever bet on Tennessee person, but if you are one of those people, it's all there for you. So superbooksports.com. I'm too superstitious. I just can't. If I would have bet Tennessee to beat Florida, they're going to lose to Florida. If I pick Florida, Tennessee might, and in fact, I picked Florida to beat Tennessee last week. Everybody gave me hell for that, as you should have. Congratulations. I deserved it. And then Tennessee won. So I'm really the reverse psychology guy. But Superbook Sports, go download it right there. And now, Zach, my thought coming out of this, obviously it's amazing just for the singular season. We mentioned it for your chances to get to a Sugar Bowl, anything. I mean, if you beat Alabama, Lord knows, a playoff, we'll see. The implications, everything's in front of you. All the possibilities are there. But I think what really struck me was the power of this moment in the context of Tennessee sports in the last 15 years, because we've all suffered through it. If you've been a Tennessee fan for all of that time, where Tennessee beats Florida, which did it. Hey, you beat Florida, but you were already kind of checked out at that point on Butch. People were sort of skeptical. They were like, yeah, we're the better team. Will he actually win? You go down by 21 early and then pull it out. This game, you felt you were better than Florida from the jump. You were up by 17 at one point in this game, and they kind of come back at the end. Like, this was real. There's so much more hope, so much more enthusiasm. And then there's the element of like, Josh Heupel has done this in a year. Less than 2 years ago, Tennessee is having a 3-win season with the bald idiot. Like, Pruitt drove this thing so far into the crust of the earth that we weren't sure what would happen. I mean, we were kind of like, who would even want this job? What is Danny White going to do? It's great that we got this, $1 million AD. This is crazy that they did that. That seems like a good move, but who is he even going to hire? Who's going to want this job? Well, Josh Heupel walks in. You and I think we were skeptical just like everybody else. We were like, he runs kind of gimmicky offense. It worked at UCF, but it was sort of diminishing returns year over year. Like, is it really an SEC system? Things like that. And this guy goes and is 4-0 through 4 games in his second year and beats Florida for the second time in 17 years. As I said, thankfulness was my main emotion, where I just went, how did we do this? I never expected this from Tennessee. I had been so beaten over the head over the years to just think that this would never happen. There will never be a moment like this for Tennessee football, like there was kind of with basketball, like there is right now with baseball. It's not happening for football. And now it is. What do we do, Zach? How do we process this?
Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming, right? Like,
it really is.
Everything's coming up aces over the last year for Tennessee sports. I mean, obviously it hasn't been perfect. You lost in the NCAA tournament in basketball. Baseball didn't make it as far as they wanted to go, and who knows what happens with football. But everything's just taken such a huge step forward since Danny White got to town. And I'm not going to say Danny White's responsible for baseball doing well, considering he didn't hire Tony Vitello, or basketball. But I think just the energy that he's brought to Tennessee has just changed the mindset. I mean, you see that game on Saturday, and Tony Vitello out there, he's on College Game Day. He's pumping the crowd up. I mean, just the way that everybody's on the same page and pulling for each other. Not that wasn't happening before, but I think everybody's just like really having a lot of fun at Tennessee right now. Yeah. And people feed off of that. The players feed off of that. The students feed off of that. The fans feed off of that. I mean, Tennessee fans deserve it. I mean, after what everything that's gone on, the last 10, 15 years, you definitely deserve it. And for me, Saturday, that had the potential for a massive letdown. I thought Tennessee being a 10.5-point favorite, the fact that they're ranked number 11, some people could say they shot up the rankings a little too fast. I mean, you beat Akron, you beat Ball State. Your best win is against a Pittsburgh team that's good, but not as good as the Pittsburgh team last year. They don't have Kenny Pickett, but you still win that game on the road. That's a nice win. And Tennessee goes from unranked to 11th in 3 weeks. I mean, that did seem a little fast. I said the 10.5-point spread seemed a little much for this rivalry in the way it's traditionally gone. If you watch College Game Day on Saturday morning, they barely talked about Florida. They didn't really talk about Billy Napier, a brand new coach there, Anthony Richardson, who looks like he could be one of the most dynamic players in the country when he's right, when he's on, when he's not hurt. And they didn't really mention them at all. It's like, I just felt going into 3:30 on Saturday, I felt like, okay, Tennessee's the better team, but we've seen this so many times before where Tennessee's got a good team and people are kind of jumping on that bandwagon a little bit, and then, they blow it. Florida makes a play at the end. So to be able to watch this game, to have some things not go Tennessee's way, there were some not great calls in that game. I'm sure on both sides, but there's a few, I'm watching Tennessee and watching their players, and there's a few holding calls, horse collar calls that don't go Tennessee's way. You got a fumble when you get into the red zone. Hendon Hooker gets banged up. Florida makes the comeback at the end. They get the most beautiful onside kick I've ever seen in my life. Like, that ball bounced as well as any onside kick has ever bounced. And you're just like, here we go. And they hold on, they win the game. And just to see the emotion from Josh Heupel after the game, to see the players celebrating, the fans in that environment. My favorite part is that they were in their traditional orange and white jerseys, so we don't have to see the replays of beating Florida in just the smoky grays. Like, you get this, nothing against those, but it's just something about beating Florida in those uniforms that just made it a little better for me.
Felt a little more real for some reason.
Yeah, it didn't feel. Well, you mentioned it there, where in that game in 2016, you got the 21-point deficit. It's basically the Josh Dobbs and Jawan Jennings show that win that game for you, and some other guys, Josh Malone and Jalen Hurd also made a big impact on that game. But Josh Dobbs and Jennings really just kind of willed that win to happen. And between that and the image of Butch Jones being there and those gray jerseys, it didn't feel quite the same. It just felt like an outlier in the last 17 years that just happened to go Tennessee's way. This game, I think even in the moment, we knew that too in 2016. I think everything that happened in 2015 at the end of the season, or the way they lost a lot of those games in 2015 and even dating back to 2014, I feel like we kind of knew that. But this feels a lot different. Like, this feels real. It feels like, okay, this is like everything's going the way it should go. Tennessee's winning games the way they should win games. Like, okay, they're really doing this. Like, that's how it feels to me. I don't know about anybody else.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's hard to describe, but it's different because that's what everybody that is, I think, outside looking in has kind of said is just like, well, this is cool. Tennessee's rebuilding, but we've seen that before. This is not the same. And I even saw, like I tweeted out that kind of how I said like appreciation and gratitude was sort of what I was feeling almost more than any other emotion. I was just like, thank you, Danny White. Thank you, Josh Heupel. Thank you to everybody involved here because I can't believe that you've done this in 18 months and that this is actually how this is going. It was just blowing my mind. And I tweeted out, something to that extent. And I got a couple people back to were like, you'll be regretting these comments in 2 years. We'll be doing. And I'm just like, shut up. Shut up. I'm as cynical as any Tennessee fan could possibly be. We have been beaten over the head for 15 years with terrible things that have happened to Tennessee football. But I'm not going to not appreciate this incredible moment. And if Josh Heupel ends up sputtering out and he does end up like the past coaches having to be fired, I'm still going to look back at this and be like, what an amazing time that was. Neyland was unbelievable. Tennessee was the better team and they beat Florida. This was different. It was. There's no taking it back. It is different no matter how you slice this. This is not Butch. This is not Pruitt. This is not Dooley. And we all know why. Even if we have a hard time explaining it, we all know how this is different. Like the belief is real. And even if this guy sputters out, the belief is real right now. This is not like, I'm not going to look back and be like, I can't believe I said that. No, that's what you should be saying right now. It's like, holy cow, how is this real? I can't believe it. That bugs me so much, right? Just go, do you have joy in your life? How do you not? We said it a couple of weeks ago. It's like, how do you truly feel joy if you've never felt pain? Well, we've had so much pain. And so when this happens, I'm feeling genuine joy, I guess. And so just screw off. Shut up with that. Like, oh, you'll regret it in 2 years. Yeah, maybe. But like, this is an amazing moment regardless. I don't care about 2 years from now. This is amazing.
Yes.
So shut up with that.
I'll tell you what I did. When we're watching games, we're tweeting about stuff, we're texting with each other, we're making kind of notes about things because we're working during these games. We have responsibilities and things we have to do. And late Saturday night, about midnight, really, everybody in the house went to sleep by this point. And I turned the game. I mean, I flipped the game back on, and I usually go back through the games, but I fast forward through certain parts and kind of get to see what I want to see, refresh my memory on how certain things went. I sat down and watched that game from start to finish. I didn't fast forward through anything but commercials. I wanted to see the emotions on the sideline. I wanted to see the reactions from the players after plays, just the way they interacted with each other. See the reactions from the fans. Just take it all in. I set my phone, 5 feet from me and just zeroed in on the game. And it was truly one of the most fun games I think I've ever watched. Not just because Tennessee won, but it was truly a chess match between Billy Napier and Josh Heupel.
Yeah.
Heupel's offense, and we've titled this show is Josh Heupel the greatest offensive mind in college football? And it's a really hard question to answer. It's obviously very subjective. But Josh Heupel's offense completely changed Billy Napier's approach in this game. I mean, Napier didn't go for it on fourth down once the previous week against South Florida. He did it a few times, like 3 times against Kentucky, and I think twice against Utah. And he went for it 6 times. He punted. I mean, there was one punt. I believe there was one punt in the game. Yeah, he went 5 for 6. I mean, obviously not great for Tennessee.
Got to improve that.
But how many teams are really going to do? Maybe more now. That maybe that's a strategy. But he completely changed his approach because of Josh Heupel's offense. Like he didn't play necessarily Florida's game. He tried to play what Tennessee forced Florida to do, which is what Tennessee wants to do. Even the other team's offense, they want to impact the way their offense makes the other team play offense. to me, when you make an SEC team, even with a new coach, you make them completely change the way that they operate and the way that they defend things and the way that their offense runs, just because of the way your offense plays. I mean, that to me says, yeah, he's one of the top offensive minds in the country, maybe the best, because he's having a huge impact mentally on these guys during the week. I mean, their week of preparation, instead of focusing on, fundamentals and the little things that can lose you a game, which coaches love, they're having to focus on changing the way that they approach the game. I mean, that's huge. And to Billy Napier's credit, it almost won him the game. I mean, he kept the ball away from Tennessee as much as he could. His aggressiveness, it bit him on the 2-point conversions, which I know there's a lot of debate about if that was the right call or not. And he's standing by what he did there. But him going for it in those situations, deep in his own territory early in the game, not only did it set a tone like, okay, we're going, this is punch for punch here, and this is going to be a battle for 60 minutes. Florida's not just going to lay down and give this one to you. Like, we came here to win this game, and we're going to do what we think we have to do to win the game. Just the way the game went in that manner was really fun to watch, and the way that Tennessee Florida should be. I mean, that's the way these games should play out. They should be fun to watch. They're intense. There's a lot of anxiety that comes along with them, but it really was a fun game to watch.
It had the exact elements of everything that you probably would have thought it would have had before the game. Tennessee was the better team from start to finish, basically. You get up by 17, and then it still had the classic Florida shenanigans at the end there. It's, Tennessee's a better team. You're kind of whipping them there at the end. You finally, Florida blinked and you get up by 17, but then throw those stats out the window. It doesn't matter. Florida's coming back. They're recovering onside kicks. And you already said they're one of the most beautiful onside kicks I've probably ever seen. That recovery was unbelievable with the one hand. Freaking crap that stressed me out to no end. And it was both things. You were the better team, and this had the classic, like, supernatural Florida shenanigans all in one package. And yet the main difference was Tennessee came out on top in this one. It wasn't the 4th and 16 in the swamp where they convert and then they beat you. This was Tennessee's day to finally really beat that mental block. I mean, that was probably the biggest piece out of all of it, was that you finally took that punch in the face that Florida usually delivers. It looked like it wasn't going to happen. It looked like you were just going to walk away and whip these guys, and you took that punch and still won that game. All credit where it's due. And you said there about potentially Hypel being the greatest mind in college, greatest offensive mind in college football. Somebody wrote an article this week saying that about Hypel, and that's going to be our final conversation on this episode, where we're going to finish with that topic. But we have to fully cover the Florida game first. We're also going to talk about the 11 a.m. LSU start time too. But we'll get there because there's some discussion going on about it in the comments right here about would that really be the case? He's the greatest offensive mind in college football, Hypel. We'll talk about it. Hypel isn't better than Ryan Day. Hypel's offense is better than Ryan Day's offense. If Ryan Day had Josh Heupel's players, he would not be as good as he is.
That's the thing with that conversation is that Josh Heupel right now has, I think, the number 5 scoring offense in the nation, a third of the way into the season. That's typical of what he's done in the past. Last year, I think Tennessee finished with, like, number 8, number 9 in the nation. When you look at teams like Ohio State, Georgia last year scored more than I think people realize. They were one of the top scoring teams in the nation. And some of these other teams, Clemson, when they're rolling and playing well, back when like Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson were there, they've got the best players in the country. What they're doing on offense isn't that unique necessarily. They're running a lot of the same plays that everybody else is running. They just have the better talent to execute those plays. I mean, there's nothing that unique about running a post route and outrunning the defender and your quarterback being good enough to hit him in stride. I mean, a lot of times that's what those guys are doing. What Josh Heupel does is he schemes these guys open. I mean, you've taken guys that were basically forgotten about before Josh Heupel got to Tennessee, like Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt to some extent. Yeah, I believe he's a true freshman, Pruitt's first year, and didn't really do much last year. He bought in to Josh Heupel this year, and look at him. I mean, he's leading the team in receiving. He's become a key player, and he's getting those guys in positions to be successful with not the same amount of talent that these other programs have. So I don't know how you can't put. I mean, whether you want to say Heupel's the best offensive mind in the country or not, doesn't really matter because everybody's probably gonna have a different answer to that if you poll fans across the nation. But you have to put him in that conversation. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that he's in that conversation of the top 3 or 4 play callers, not just play callers, but offensive mind in general, because of what he's accomplished in such a short time at Tennessee. And compare it to what Tennessee was the year before he got there, when they were like 100th in the nation in scoring. I mean, with the same players basically.
Well, here's what I'll say. collegefootballstats.com, the number one offense in America through 4 weeks, is your Tennessee Volunteers. It is not Ohio State. It is 559 yards a game. Now, Ohio State is number 2. I'll give Big Ten Jeff that. Ohio State is number 2. But Tennessee's offense is number 1. With way lesser players than Ohio State has. Way lesser players than Ohio State has. But, do it that way you will. We'll come back to that because I want to talk about that article and some of the stuff there. But to get into the actual, what happened in that game, because we've sort of covered, again, sort of that 1,000-foot view, what it means for Tennessee as a whole. But the actual game and going forward to the LSU game now, thankfully you have a bye week. It could not come at a better time, in my personal opinion. This game, your offense was unbelievable, but specifically Hendon Hooker. He's playing some of the best football we've seen from a quarterback at the University of Tennessee ever. I think that game, he had numbers that were comparable to Peyton Manning games. People brought that up. He actually it was the most passing yards against Florida since Peyton Manning. Look at that. So, and then it was the first quarterback since Josh Dobbs to have 300 yards passing, 100 yards rushing in a game. Just all of this stuff. He's immediately launched into that greatest quarterbacks to ever play at this university conversation right now. He's directly in the middle of that best quarterbacks in America conversation. People are already Robert Griffin is bringing up he's my Heisman front runner and all this stuff. The hype just went from 0 to 1,000 with this game because it was just it was the biggest game on Saturday. And so there's that. I think that's kind of been talked into the ground. And me and Crompton on the post-game show went really deep on Hooker because Cromp's a former quarterback, and I got his full take on that. But outside of that, this happened without Cedric Tillman on the field. And then Jabari Small, supposedly banged up, had a bum shoulder, rehabs throughout the week, comes in, rushes for 90 yards, has a great performance, an impactful performance. Then you have, I think, the defensive line. So I mentioned the secondary. The secondary is probably not going to get too many accolades coming out of this game, but the defensive line, Amari Thomas has an excellent game. He makes arguably the play of the game and forces a fumble in the most crucial point in this game where it was looking like it was going to be purely a shootout. He finally makes Florida blink, punches the ball out. Jeremy Banks recovers. And then you get to the secondary. This has to be talked about, too, in this game. They just got burned like a thin piece of toast. That was just ugly. But I will say of that, it was clear that Tim Banks came into this game, defensive coordinator for Tennessee, where his game plan was the exact definition of sellout to stop the run. It was very clear he was very worried that Anthony Richardson was going to run all over them, and he did not. I mean, he had 65 yards, I think. And I think I even mentioned on our show last week, I said if you can hold him to 75 yards, you stand a really good chance in this game. Now, I didn't think he would flip around and throw for 500 yards on us because he hadn't really shown the ability to honestly put a pass anywhere close where it's supposed to go in the last few weeks. But Richardson, to absolutely his credit, somehow found the ability to put the ball where it's supposed to go on a lot of throws. He was still pretty off. I think overall he threw for 56% or something like
Yeah,
that
he
in
had
this game.
20 incompletions.
Yeah, it was still a little rough. He was way overshooting guys on some throws and things like that. But to his credit, and Tennessee was playing soft zone. They had subpar athletes out there essentially having to play soft zone because they knew they could not handle man coverage. And so you kind of combine all that together. They were genuinely effective stopping the run, and you have to acknowledge that. Omari Thomas makes a giant play. You have to acknowledge that. The defensive line didn't get penetration like you'd love to see, but it was good enough. And then the giant amount of passing yards that you allowed didn't let Florida win the game. So you take all of that in and you go, yeah, the defense got roasted. You won the game still. Take it in, improve. I do think to a certain extent this is a personnel problem, and you got to, Christian Conyer needs to show up. Like, hurry up, guys. We need some of these recruits to get into the building, some transfers. But outside of that, it was the game went how it should have gone for Tennessee. You played your game. Tennessee didn't necessarily dominate, but they played their game. They didn't dominate, they dictated the game. That's how I would put it. They didn't win by 30, but they dictated the flow of that game completely, which was that's how Josh Heupel wins.
To talk about the defense real quick before I move on to the rest of the game, it's kind of funny. Tennessee's defense obviously gave up a lot of yardage. Part of that was just the way the game was played. Like you said, some personnel things. Secondary has really got to improve. But Tennessee's two biggest games of the two biggest wins of the year, Pittsburgh and Florida, the defense both games, the defense made the play that sealed the win for Tennessee.
Yeah.
Against Pittsburgh, you've got the Trayvon Flowers sack and then the incompletion at the end, and then against Florida, it was the defensive pressure, from the defensive line that forced the bad throw from Anthony Richardson. He didn't have enough time to really get the ball downfield. And if he had more time, there was a Florida receiver kind of open near the goal line. And I shudder to think what happens if Tennessee's defensive ends don't get to Richardson. But they did get to him. They forced the bad throw. So you can criticize the defense a lot. Obviously, I think Tim Banks is doing the best with what he has. I think the schemes we're seeing from him, part of that's to compensate for not as much talent, some of that soft coverage that you're talking about. But he still dialed up a good play call there when it mattered. I mean, you could have easily not brought pressure there, but it was the right decision, and it's what sealed the win. But as far as the actual game itself, one thing that stood out to me was just how many different players for Tennessee made huge plays that really changed the momentum of the game. Obviously, Hendon Hooker made the most plays, the 44-yard run when he was about to get sacked, and it would have been 2nd and 16 instead of
massive
1st and 10 in the red zone. But it wasn't just Hooker. I mean, you've got the Ramel Keaton catch, one of the best catches I've ever seen in my life, and that came on a 99-yard drive just before halftime where Tennessee absolutely had to score. And the fact that was a must-score drive, and then they come through like that just showed me a lot about this team, the resolve of this team, and just the mental state of this team. It's in a really good place. But then you've got the 3rd and 10 throw to Princeton Fant that kept the one drive alive, where Hooker is facing pressure again, rolls out, and Princeton Fant, I mean, the window to hit him was tiny. And Fant had a fumble earlier in the game and then comes up huge there to make that play. You had some big runs by Jabari Small. Brew McCoy had a big catch down the sideline where he got open. There was just so many guys that contributed to this win where it wasn't, we kind of talked about it earlier. It wasn't just like when Josh Dobbs would take over a game and he's the reason Tennessee won. Like, this was truly a team effort, and that to me was the most exciting part of the game. Like, it's really fun seeing when you look back at the game and you say, if that play right there is not made, Tennessee's in trouble. But they made those plays. Like, they didn't leave those plays out there, and that was the difference in the game, I thought.
Every instance where Florida fought back, Tennessee had an answer at every single turn. And that's where you just look and you say Tennessee is the better team here. And it was so clear throughout that entire game. Yeah, you got down 14-10. They come right back. Ramel Keaton makes that play. A depth guy makes that play. So huge.
I mean, he's the guy filling in for Tillman.
Yeah, he was the Tillman replacement. Like, it's just crazy. And then you go down and top it off with a Brew McCoy, awesome touchdown catch, awesome play from Hooker where he just threads that needle and sets it right in there for him. Everything about that, and that was probably that entire drive. That was probably the game right there, because Tennessee gets the ball back, immediately scores another touchdown after the half. It's what took Tennessee. They got that 10-point lead, and it was enough cushion for them to outlast any serious push from Florida. And I did want to, so
Danny put that up there about Kamal Hadden.
Yeah. So, Danny says, I was mad that Kamal hadn't got that interception. He cost us so much during that game. That dude isn't good, but he's been your best defensive back up to this point.
Something that we haven't really talked about because Tennessee won the game, I feel like, is that first Anthony, I think it was the first, it might have been the second one, I can't remember, that 40-some yard touchdown pass that Anthony Richardson threw, or close to that yardage, where, one, it was bad coverage by Hadden. He kind of left the guy open and left that window. And then the tackling on that play was some of the worst tackling I've ever seen by a college football team. You had I believe it was three guys just trying to rip the ball out. And I get it. You're trying to force turnovers. But Ventrell Miller for Florida showed how you do that. I mean, you're wrapping a guy up, and you're like Charles Tillman when he was in the NFL, and you're trying to punch that ball out. And if you don't hit it, you don't hit it. You got to tackle the guy. I mean, that's got to be your first priority before the turnover. But that right there, if Tennessee loses that game, that right there is a highlight that's being shown for a long time. And it was just really poor execution. And Kamal Hadden, it definitely was not his best game. There were several moments where he did get burnt, but there's been other times where he looked pretty decent too. It hasn't been all bad for him. So you got to hope that as the year progresses that he takes a step forward, because you really don't have anybody else to step up. I mean, they were missing Warren Burrell in that game, and that's somebody else that we've been giving a hard time. So, I mean, you see what happens when he's not there. Exactly. I mean,
yeah,
we've been giving him a hard time, but you missed him on Saturday.
Yeah. John Hill says the sad thing to say is we missed Warren Burrell. I completely agree. I was like, God, that would have been nice. Like Brandon Turnage goes in there and you go, he made some nice plays last year. He's finally getting in the game, and immediately he gets burned up in a play, gives up a giant pass.
David also brings up here that, Dylan Sampson, that's another player that did not play against Florida that I thought would be a huge weapon. He's the fastest running back on the team. He's faster than Jalen Wright, who's pretty fast himself. And we kind of saw against Akron, they've kind of been working him in, how electric and dynamic he can be. And I felt like if he was healthy, he was going to be a big part of the offensive plan, because the coaches have really indicated that they trust him. They are willing to play him in big moments. And I think they would have played him in this game. So that's a guy, if you get him back for the LSU game and down the stretch, that can really bring another element to this offense. We talked about it last week. We saw the speed option play that they ran with Dylan Sampson. And you maybe see some more of that. And you just might see some of these runs that like that Jabari Small run where he went for 30-some yards, however long, 39 yards. Maybe with Dylan Sampson, that turns into a touchdown. And nothing, not taking anything away from Jabari Small. You said he had an injury. He's banged up, and he went out there and averaged almost 5 yards a carry. He was a big reason why Tennessee won the game. But Sampson's another guy that you don't have him. And even though he's a true freshman, I do think Tennessee missed him on Saturday against Florida.
They did. Genuinely. But that's the state of things for that defensive backfield. It just is a little rough. But I think that the thing that probably makes me the most happy about the actual back and forth of that game with Florida is that you got Florida's best game. I mean, I think you got probably the biggest roundhouse punch you could get from them this year. They lacked depth. They lacked talent at some important positions, and they really brought it to you. And you outlasted All of it. I mean, they down to a freakish point where they were able to recover an onside kick, which is extremely rare. I mean, they did everything in the kitchen sink. And like, let's bring up, like, we've already mentioned that they just went balls to the wall with going on fourth downs. The fourth down at their own 30. And this nut, Napier, I don't know if this was even the call. It might have just been the play that Richardson saw, takes the top off of the defense and throws the longest ball he threw in that entire game. I mean, I don't think he really had another throw like that, even an attempt like that in the rest of the game. I'd have to rewatch it all to confirm that, but he didn't throw a bunch of deep bombs. And this guy from their own 30 on a fourth down was a long ball. And I was like, if this, like, I think, was Tennessee up 10 or 17 at that point? I think they were up 17. They would have given Tennessee the ball back up 17 at the 30-yard line in the red zone. If that ball goes 2 feet beyond that receiver and he doesn't catch it, people are probably like calling for this dude's head after this game, because I think Tennessee would have, you don't get that kind of comeback if Tennessee gets the ball back right there, and they would have immediately scored. I mean, that's just how Tennessee was playing. Florida had no answer for Hendon Hooker. And like that play was genuinely, I think Crompton said it on our show. It was like one of those where if you're a Florida fan, you went, what are we doing? What do we do? Okay, all right. Well, he made the play. You know, you're like, oh, well, all right. You know, it completely freaks you out until it actually works. And
I don't think
it took nutty plays like that, and you still beat them. And I'm so glad that it wasn't just like, oh, well, Florida totally screwed the pooch. Florida had a 15-point lead and they blew it or something like that. You brought it to them and you beat them, and that's nice. And it's one of the things that we've already listed that make this different, make it feel different.
Yeah, I think Florida was a really dangerous team on Saturday because I think Napier was playing like he had nothing to lose. You're a 10.5-point underdog. All the hype is on Tennessee. I mean, we talked about that, how nobody was really even giving Florida a chance. Thank goodness Kirk Herbstreit was picked Florida, because I feel like usually that's bad karma when you don't.
Yes.
Bad vibes when everybody goes for the same team. But I think Napier felt like that was the only way he beat Tennessee, was being really bold, and like you said, going for it on fourth down, going for that deep shot on fourth down. That's a really gutsy thing to do. But I don't think, if Florida's favored in that game, if that game's in the swamp, if this is like year 2 of the Napier era, if just the vibe around the game's a lot different, I don't think he coaches the game the same way. I know he did some of that stuff at Louisiana, but not to the same extent. I really feel like he was playing like, okay, everybody expects us to lose this game, so if we do lose it, it's not a big deal. I'm in year 1. We're getting better. You know, we're building this program, trying to do it the right way. So I felt like that was, in his mind, the only way that he was going to beat Tennessee. And he was right. I mean, like we said, it almost worked. I mean, Florida executed a lot of those risky decisions. They only stopped them one time on fourth down, and they, it worked out for them. The other thing about this Florida team, they don't have that edge rusher that you feel like they usually have. They can just live in the backfield, and they don't really have that shutdown cornerback that they have a lot of times. I felt like those two things specifically is what made this Florida team different. And they didn't have a guy that was just getting the ball in space and just carving up Tennessee's defense. Obviously, they had a lot of yards out there, but Tennessee was able to kind of like bend but don't break. Like they made some plays, but they were able to stop them on the fourth down in the red zone. They were able to hold them to the field goal attempt, one that was missed, I believe, and one that was made. So it was just kind of that philosophy on both sides. Tennessee was going to give a little, try not to give in all the way, and then Florida was going to be super aggressive. So I don't think this is the way future Florida-Tennessee games will be played, just because of the unique nature of this game.
I agree, and credit to Napier. I can't really tell how good of a coach.
Yeah, I can't either.
He is yet, because that was such a unique situation where he was just throwing everything. I would say that was kind of a must-go game for Napier. I don't know if you ever you ever have leftovers in your fridge and you have a must-go meal, you go, everything in the fridge must go. And then you just throw everything in there. You just lima beans and chicken and whatever is in, just whatever it is. It's just whatever you got in the fridge. Like he just took, all right, we got, throw ice cream on it. I don't care. Just throw it must go. We got to get this out of here. Like he was just anything and everything, and it still didn't work.
I mean, the only two, like the 2-point conversion stuff, I know there's a lot of debate about that. I still disagree with his reasoning. I don't know if you heard his reasoning today. He mentioned the point spread and being a 2-score underdog, and that you're 63% less likely to win in that situation. It felt very Butch Jones like.
That's a Butch's chart move right there.
I'm not. That's what it felt like to me, because he's letting the numbers dictate what he does, which I do believe there's a place for analytics in sports, even in football to some extent. But I like what Josh Heupel said last week too. He takes that stuff into account. He's talking to his staff. They're going with the feel of the game and what they think the situation calls for in that moment. And to me, like that's what a coach does. I mean, that's what you're a game day coach. You're not looking at the paper, letting the paper make the decisions. You're making the decision with your gut. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. I felt like that was one misstep. And then the third down play where he had none of his offensive linemen move and tried to run the play, and Tennessee's defenders just go straight through the gaps, and they're on Richardson in no time, while literally the Florida offensive line is just looking behind them, wondering like, I hope this works out. We're just going to chill here for a little bit. Like that was such a, I hate to do this, but we saw Butch Jones do some similar stuff to that during this time.
Absolutely.
I think he ran that like exact play. It's like that. You're not in the Sun Belt. Like this is an SEC game. Line up and get the yardage. I mean, run the play best on best and try to beat Tennessee. I mean, that's what you do in the SEC. If you're running this weird trick play in that situation that really didn't fool a single person at all, I felt like that was a bad. Maybe he learns from that. He's in his first year. I would think he would learn from it. If he doesn't, then Florida's got some real issues, because every coach is going to make mistakes, and you can't be so hard-headed that you're not willing to rethink the way you approach things. So
if he's really like Butch, he won't change a thing. That'll be the real mark.
He stood pretty firm on the 2-point conversion thing today when you talked. And it's like you kick the extra points both times, and that final drive is completely different. You're playing for a field goal. You're just trying to get in the field goal range, and then you get in overtime. Who knows what happens in overtime? I know that home has the edge in overtime, but I just don't feel like that's the case in college football because of the way overtime's played. I mean, you're each getting a possession. A lot of it dictated by who gets the first possession, as far as whether you got to go for a field goal or a touchdown. Like it's not like basketball to me. Like in basketball, it's football's a momentum game as well. But when it comes to overtime, I just feel like it's a different situation. I don't like the whole, playing for overtime feeling, which is what Napier claimed he was doing by going for 2 earlier. He said he was playing for the tie early, which also is kind of strange because he's managing the game early in the fourth quarter, expecting the tie instead of going for the win, and he really cost himself a chance at the tie by doing that.
I think it's either one of these two things. Sam Hargrove says that's just going for broke. There's no analytics to it. Or it's what Mark Jones said, is just people from Florida can't do math.
It's one of those thing is what is the scared money doesn't make money. That's his whole philosophy, whatever that means. But
let's do somebody did tweet this of me during that game, just thinking of Napier's cheesiness. He said special teams was huge. The onside kick was massive. So the game-changing coordinator did change the game. So
yeah, maybe that was
congratulations to him.
They didn't get a chance to block a punt because Josh Heupel did not punt. And that was another huge thing in this game. Is like they're going straight into Florida territory. The only time they got really stopped, they stopped themselves. I mean, that was not something you expect from Tennessee. When was the last time Tennessee went through a game and didn't punt?
It's insane. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, but it's not often. I can tell you that much. There's a lot about what Hypel is doing right now that's completely out of the ordinary. That's for sure. But to just wrap it up in a bow, I'm I am just happy that they pulled it out. I don't care how it happened. W is a W is a W. It shows up with that W in the win-loss chart, no matter what that final score is, as long as you're in the lead when that clock hits 0. So,
What was your favorite moment of the game? Because I know my favorite moment, without a
ooh,
doubt, besides the ending, obviously, besides the actual win itself, there were so many. I feel like there were so many memorable and signature moments in that game, which
the
is part of why I liked that game so much.
yeah, it was exciting from beginning to end. I mean, I think when Wright ran in that touchdown to go up 17, and you went like, "This is about to happen.
That was
This is
exactly
really about to
mine.
happen, isn't it?"
That is
Like,
exactly mine. The Gator
yeah,
chomp in the end zone. I mean,
ah,
the throat. I didn't even notice it live. The throat
so good.
slash definitely better than the Tyler Bray throat slash.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Bray's looked better, just the way he did it. It's very gifable,
But he won.
yeah,
Jalen Wright
Wright
won,
won.
which is the
Yeah. I love that. I mean, to me, that's what SEC football is all about. Tennessee, Florida on a fall Saturday. CBS, as bad as Gary Danielson is, and he was as bad as ever. I felt like during that game, he was just maddening at times. But that just intensity, the loudness of the fans that it came through on television, and then just those moments, that Gator chomp in the end zone, like that. You live for those moments. I feel like if you're a college football fan.
Mark says the finger sniff by Smalls. I saw. Didn't Richardson did that? Did Smalls do that?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Maybe did Smalls do it to mock Richardson? I don't know.
Maybe who was it? Gerald Mincy that flipped off a
yeah, that might have been my
player?
favorite moment. Also,
yeah, and especially since he came from Florida. I mean, that's where he transferred from. It makes it even better.
You know it means something to him. That's for dang sure. He was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although you did saw him after the game. I saw some video of him after the game. He's hugging dudes, and he's
I mean,
Florida players.
And all those guys know each other. They all get recruited together. They go on trips together. They're at 7-on-7 camps together and these showcases. They all come up through high school knowing each other. It's so much different. And I know a lot of people don't like that. I get it. But it's so much different than it was in the 90s with social media and texting and the way that they keep in touch with each other. They build real relationships that last. But I can guarantee you when they were out there on the field Saturday, there was no love lost. I mean, you saw Hendon Hooker getting chippy on several plays.
Mm-hmm.
You saw other guys doing it too. And I love seeing that fire from Hendon Hooker because he's such a reserved guy. And you look at him and he always looks calm. He looks poised, and that's what you want from your quarterback. But he's got that fire in him too. When he takes off running, that one specific situation, they were down close to the end zone. Tennessee's trying to run their tempo, and the Florida players kind of laying on him, not letting him get up. And you saw that from Hooker, kind of that frustration, not really frustration, just kind of that like, hey, get off of me. Like, we're trying to go score, go on with yourself. And that was fun to see. So the chippiness was still there, even if some of these guys are friends off the field.
Yeah. Even just the general feeling with the fans is different from back then. Cause I had some, before the game, I went over to a friend's house and we were like having just, sort of pregame. They were going to the game, and they were taking their like smaller child to the game. And I was like, man, back in the 90s, you would not find 8-year-old at the Florida Tennessee game unless you want your 8-year-old to see and hear some things you don't want an 8-year-old seeing and hearing. It's not as profane as it was back then. I'm sure it's still not nice, but also there weren't very many Florida fans there.
I noticed that too. I look back. I had pictures on my phone still from the first Checker Neyland, which was in 2014 for the Florida game, and I have pictures that I'd taken at that game, as it was filling in, and there was considerably more Florida fans at that game than there was at this game.
Well, either way, great win. I want to finish with talking about the recruiting piece of this because it was massive for that too. And then I did want to mention Michael Allen to your question about when Tennessee hadn't punted in a game. He said he thinks that it's Missouri from last year. I could see that because that was
game.
Tennessee scored 63 in that one, didn't they? I think it was like blowout city.
In for Crompton that week. in the post game shows and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the games, and I remember we were like begging for 70. Like at halftime, we're like, just go for 70,
Right.
just do it, just do 70 in an SEC game. I mean, it wasn't far
Please.
from it. I mean, and Hypel,
No.
you know, he's not afraid to do it. He keeps the gas pushed down in those situations, but he, you know, you bring in the backups and stuff. It's not willing, not something you want to get somebody hurt over. That is something else about the Florida game. One is they should have kept their foot on the gas a little more in that last drive.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a situation where Tennessee's still trying to figure out. There were times where last year where we felt like they should have bled clock and they didn't. That's an area where I'd like to see Hypel improve. But we did see a few times where Tennessee kind of slowed down their tempo, or they got to the line, changed their plays. They didn't just rush through it. So this offense still works, even if it's not tempo. It's not just the tempo that makes it work. Like there's some really good things going on in that offense.
And I've noticed the things that they do, they can waste time, but like Hooker will get up to the line and like audible twice, you know, just like do something.
Or they'll huddle and then go to the line real fast to kind of give that illusion of tempo.
Yeah, exactly. They do things that do waste clock, even if it feels like they're still getting on the ball.
And it's that stuff right there that really, you know, goes into that conversation about Josh Heupel being this great offensive mind. It's not just about being a play caller. It's the way that he's coached these guys. Doing things like that, getting the ball to the right referee, getting lined up. There's so many times I look up and Brew McCoy's like the first wide receiver lined up and he's ready to go. And it's not that the other guys are being slow, but I mean, he's just where he needs to be that fast. And for the most part, you don't see alignment issues with Tennessee's offense. And as fast as they're running and as much as they're having to process in the moment, because you got to look at what the defense is doing, because if you're a wide receiver, where that safety is or where that linebacker is might dictate where you go on the field on that play. So you're having to read that, I mean, in literally seconds. The fact that Hypel has coached this group to do that effectively, that's, to me, part of what makes him one of the best offensive minds in the country. It's not just the scheme. Absolutely. It's the fact that he can teach this scheme, get kids to buy in, and they run it effectively and efficiently. And they're just 17 games into this, and they're averaging 50 points a game.
Well, before we finish off with that conversation about the best offensive mind, that claim of the best offensive mind in college football, let's wrap up the Florida conversation. We're talking about the recruits that were there. Somebody just mentioned, Sam Hargrove said David Hobbs, the big defensive lineman, his mom said it was an amazing experience. That was an across-the-board thing from the recruits at this game. And just from anybody that was there, because I watched just different reactions. Like you saw, like, the stand-up comedian Theo Vaughn was there for some reason.
He's an LSU guy. And
yeah. And he was there with the Barstool guys, but I saw like the Barstool guys. I saw like Dave Portnoy and some of those dudes where they were just like, this environment's insane. Like just, you know, saying how crazy cool it was, and just other national media that was there. I think it was, what's the guy, 247 Josh Pate.
Yeah.
Was saying how crazy it was. Like outside observers were just like, this is unreal.
The fact that Arian Foster was back in Knoxville kind of blew my mind. I know he's there with this podcast, that he does some stuff with Barstool as well. So it was a business trip for him, but you still see photos of him on the sideline. It's like, who?
Yeah.
With everything that happened with Arian Foster in the years after he left Tennessee and just his general tone towards college athletics in general.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he was there, but maybe that's a sign that he's on board with the way Josh Heupel's doing things, or he probably just doesn't care, to be honest, knowing him. But either way, it was surprising to see him there.
Yeah, and just so many former players in general were there, which I think is a great thing for recruiting too. You can get those guys to kind of talk to recruits, be like, hey.
Jabari Davis on the field with a cigar after the game is a pretty good image.
A cigar, yell at F Florida.
Yes.
Great stuff. But the recruits themselves, they were there. Mentioned David Hobbs said he had a great time. I did just want to play this clip of this player is already committed to Tennessee. He's offensive lineman Sham Umarov, who's, I think he's a pretty highly rated 4-star that Hypel has coming in next year. He was at the game and he just tweeted a video of the final play of the game. Haddon gets that interception. And then this was like his reaction to just what was around him. And I thought it was funny. It's just the audio, but just his reaction to everything. Fireworks are going off, and this was what it sounded like.
Oh my God!
I just love that. It is these, oh my God. Dude's freaking out. These 18-year-olds get here. They get shown a great time prior to the game. I mean, Tennessee's facility is world class, and they hook them up with cool stuff, cool experiences, everything that they do. They go to nice restaurants or whatever. Like, it's the whole thing. And then you go to that game and you give them that viewing experience with Neyland checkered, 102,000 people, unbelievable sight. And I mean, the kid's reaction is just, oh my God. Like, I think that reaction just speaks volumes. Like, this, how does it not just blow you away and go like, I want to play here? Because you also saw this was Vyson Lang, who's an interior offensive lineman that Tennessee is trying to recruit as a 3-star player. He said, when I was standing on the field, I started looking around. I started having goosebumps. I started shaking a little bit. When the players came out, they started bringing more energy. And I was like, oh my God, I feel like I want to put pads on and play against Florida. They had me jumping, and I felt like I had 10 Red Bulls. It's second to none, in my personal opinion. Just that stadium experience. There's 3 schools in college football, maybe, that have a comparable experience to this. Like, to be able to make that kind of impact is so massive. And then, of course, you walk away with a win that just takes it that much further. And what can you even say? Hopefully this does. I think it seemed like the tenor of this article about Vyson Lang, it seems like he kind of got that kid in the boat. I don't know. He hasn't committed or anything yet, but just the way that he talked about it, it was just like, you made a deep impact in his mind, I think. And
well, I mean, that's the stuff that you cannot replicate that. You can't fake it. You can't, you can take these recruits and you can do your photo shoots and you can take them on the river. You can do all this stuff and show them around Knoxville and put on as great of a visit as you possibly can. But there's no program in the country can, like, that's organic. Like, that's genuine. Like, that right there is just the Tennessee fan base. You can't predict it. You can't recreate it. You can't set it up. So for that to happen, it's obviously huge for recruiting. And you wonder, you talked about, there's not many places that have that atmosphere. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, you've got these huge crowds at Alabama, Georgia, some of these great programs where winning has become such the expectation that people aren't surprised when they win. The fans aren't surprised when they win. They're happy. They're cheering. I'm not saying that it's, the old Sam Cassell wine and cheese crowd that you sometimes get at college athletics with some of the folks that go to the games, but they're just used to it. Tennessee was begging for a reason to erupt after that Florida game. They're begging for a reason to just let all that emotion out. And you don't get that unless the program's kind of been down a little bit. You can't get that type of reaction from a fan base unless that's present. So you got this passionate fan base, this exciting offense, Checker Neyland, the upgrades to Neyland, your party deck that they're taking the recruits and showing them around, all these updates that Danny White has helped bring to the stadium and to the program in general, all that stuff combined. It's like the perfect storm for that weekend with as many recruits as they had in town. I just can't imagine that game really going any better for Tennessee. And in fact, I know that it was close at the end and you had that last second pass where everybody's holding their breath, hoping that Tennessee holds on. But I think that moment created such an even bigger explosion because the outcome was still in doubt until the very last play. So when that ball's intercepted and Haddon goes down on the knee to end the game, all that just comes out. It wasn't like, okay, we're up by 17. We know we're going to win this game. It is kind of, there's a great reaction, but it's subdued because it was expected. No, this was just raw emotion So it was. I mean, it just couldn't have went any better for Tennessee.
Yeah, that was as good of a recruit experience as you could possibly give if you're Tennessee. I don't know how it could go better. You won one of your biggest games of the year in front of an unbelievable exploding crowd. And I'm sure that like these recruits, there's plenty of people who follow so closely that they would like know who these guys are. To point at them, I actually had a friend tell me they went to a tailgate and Nico was there, and they were like, "Oh yeah, people were taking pictures with Nico."
That dude
and all
is
this stuff.
everywhere. Everywhere.
Seriously.
It is insane. I cannot imagine what it's going to be like when he's actually in Knoxville and playing at Tennessee. I mean, he is already one of the most recognizable football players in town, and he hasn't even played a down for Tennessee yet. It's incredible, and he's so gracious with his time. I mean, you see photos of him with little kids all the time, photos of adults. I mean, he will take a photo with anybody. He just seems like a genuinely nice person that is genuinely just loving it. Like he's happy to be embraced by Tennessee. He loves everything Tennessee's doing. He's bought in completely. You can talk about the NIL deal and all that stuff all you want, but look, somebody can give you money and you make your decision based on that, but that doesn't mean you're genuinely happy with your decision. You're doing it for a different motive. I mean, he does not look like a guy that's there just because of the $8 million. Like it doesn't seem that way to me at all. Like it seems like he genuinely loves it.
And Tennessee fans need to know that they're part of what is going to make that so special for him. He is that personable and he's that gracious with his time and stuff like that. But why would he even want to come here if there was nobody making that experience special? He can be that personable, but if nobody's coming, I want to take a picture with him. What does that even mean?
And look, we don't know the details of any NIL deals, the exact details for sure, right? You don't know what other schools came at him with. You don't know what he possibly turned down to go to Tennessee. Maybe it was more, maybe it was in the neighborhood. We don't know that. So I know a lot of detractors of Tennessee will throw that out there, like, oh, he's just there because of the money. And we're like, you know what? Bryce Young is getting paid at Alabama. Okay, CJ Stroud is getting paid at Ohio State. All of these guys are getting paid. That you're not going to be a 5-star quarterback and go somewhere for free. But even Arch Manning is getting a nice little something down in Texas. I mean, that's just the way this world works, and it's worked that way for a long, long time.
What is that video clip of Stephen F. Smith where he goes, "We don't care." That's my reaction to that. We don't care. I don't care why he's here. I'm just glad he's here.
That's the business end of it. That's like worrying about Josh Heupel's contract incentives or even his contract in general. I mean, I know we get into the weeds on a lot of this stuff. Who cares that he just got a $1 million raise? If he tanks and does terrible the rest of the year, has a bad year 3, Tennessee will get rid of him and go to somebody else. It won't matter what's on his contract. Texas A&M's if Jimbo Fisher continues down the path he's on and gives them 8-9 win years instead of playoff appearances, they will fire him. They will come up with the $90 million and they will find somebody else. Like that stuff just doesn't matter. It's not your money. I mean, if you donate whatever, but it's not coming out of your wallet, as far as your day-to-day operating expenses and this and that. Like, don't worry about it. It is what it is. All you should care about is the wins.
Exactly. I don't care. Just glad he's here. That's all I know. It's like with this win. Oh, well, it wasn't. They almost gave it away there at the end. And I don't care. There's a win. You beat Florida. I don't care. I'm happy. I'm happy to be here. That's and I did want to finish a couple of people there. They were mentioning Carnell Tate in the comments here. I think to go off the point of just how great that atmosphere was, I think if you're going to get Carnell Tate, you got to get him to come back. You got to get him to visit for one of these games, and it needs to be like a good one. And I think if you beat LSU, you'll probably sell out every home game for the rest of the year or close to it. So you'll have good environments for the rest of this season. You got to get them to come back, which I have absolutely no idea what the status of that is, if they're even trying to do that. But just to address that one, because it's a name that people keep bringing up. Oh, it'd be so great to get Carnell Tate. I mean, you're showing everything on the field that you need to show to that kid. He will come here, get immediate playing time, and he will put up giant numbers in Josh Heupel's offense. But man, you have to show him that experience and get him, like Bison Lang said there, you got to get him on the sideline looking up, getting goosebumps. And then I think you could probably have a better chance of doing that. But that is it there. Before we finish with this last conversation, Zach, any parting thoughts on the Florida game? It's been an hour and 10 on just that.
No, I mean, I could probably talk about it for several hours. I feel like I've done nothing but talk about it, even when I wasn't working since Saturday. I've thought about it. I mean, I watched parts of it this morning, just kind of reliving a few of those moments. But just a great win for that program, and just the way that they're trying to build things, and it gives fans something that they haven't got, since Philip Fulmer was in town, where you're not in year two, like, okay, program's making incremental steps forward like it did under Butch, like it did under Pruitt. Didn't really take any steps forward under Dooley necessarily, but this time you're seeing the actual real progress really fast. It's not year three. It's not year four. It's not a fluke. Josh Heupel's doing it ahead of schedule compared to these other coaches. So it's the first time where it's like you can look at this and say, okay, he's doing things a lot different than the other 3 or 4 guys that came before him. Maybe this is going to be different. Because I think every Tennessee fan, to some extent, whether they're verbalizing it or not, in the back of their mind is still kind of waiting on, okay, when does this all go south? And I know that's kind of a fatalist view, but after everything that's happened the last 15 years,
It's hard to avoid.
I don't see how you can't have that. We joke about PTSD, and that's a very serious thing, but that is a form of that to some extent on a much smaller scale, where you've had all these like terrible endings to games and seasons and coaches and teams happen that you're just like, okay, when's it going to happen? When does that Alabama, Texas A&M, South Carolina, Vanderbilt stretch like happened in 2016? When does that happen? So hopefully it doesn't. I don't necessarily think it's going to. I have not seen any signs that that's going to happen. I have not seen any major red flags from Josh Heupel, really red flags at all. I mean, I've seen a few things I think he could do a little better as far as, running clock out and padding leads, things like that. But there's not been anything egregious that he's done that just makes me question whether he's the right guy or not.
And I think one of the main things that makes me hopeful for that future, that maybe he can stave off that fatal Tennessee moment, is that it seems like he's actually willing to evolve, to like become, change things to become better. And so that is one of the hallmarks of a great leader. It's what we've always brought it up when we have that conversation. It's what Nick Saban does. He's always willing to evolve. Well, his offense is becoming stale. Well, he hires Lane Kiffin and he just gets better than you at the thing that you're doing. Like, I hope Hypel continues, just keep evolving, keep getting better. And maybe we can stave that off. And maybe I think it is no coincidence, from my personal opinion at this moment, it's no coincidence that he's been this good so quickly. So keep it going.
That's the only sign. Sports is all about symmetry, and you look into the past to kind of predict the future, which isn't a very scientific method, obviously. But these quick starts from coaches, I mean, that's the one thing that you can point to as tangible to say, okay, that is a sign that this is going to go the right direction. Because previously, as Tennessee fans, you look at Jeremy Pruitt losing to Georgia State, and you're like, oh, okay, well, Nick Saban lost to Louisiana Monroe in his first season, so maybe this is kind of going to go like that, or okay, this guy was 5-7 in his first season, so it is possible that maybe Butch Jones can turn this around. You're not having to do that with Josh Heupel. You're just getting the results, and there's no substitute for that.
Yeah, thankfully, no, not having to justify nonsense. I guess before this final conversation, we are going to get to it. Tennessee LSU is the 11 a.m. local time, noon Eastern time game. 3:30 would have been ideal to me afternoon going in tonight. I just love that. And there's so much pageantry to it, but they're doing the doubleheader on CBS. Tennessee just played on CBS, so they're not going to put them on there 2 weeks in a row. And then the night game on ESPN, I think, was already kind of set. And so you're the beginning of the day. I think this plays in Tennessee's favor. You look back, like a game that I think of where you get that noon weirdness was the Auburn game with Jeremy Pruitt. Pruitt, as big of an idiot as he was, the one game that I thought, like, wow, I can't believe that really happened, was at Auburn. He goes and beats Gus Malzahn. Still so strange, but it did happen. And I think that this kind of plays into your hands. You're not going to be facing that, had all day to get drunk Death Valley crowd. And it's not going to be as wild as it could be. Good Lord, they're probably all going to be hungover still. I think there's going to be a ton of Tennessee fans there. I personally know a whole set of people that are going already because it's just, it's kind of one of those places where you want to make a trip to. Baton Rouge is fun. It's a cool place close to New Orleans down there. And so I think it plays in Tennessee's hands. Obviously, next week we're going to get deeper into the LSU game, but that just got announced right before we did this show. So Ben Hall right here in the comments, he makes a good point. Tennessee always practices in the morning. Hypel, famously he's a morning person. He like greets the players as they come in the door or something.
Like 7 a.m. or something.
Yeah, it's like his whole shtick. And so, yeah, maybe it plays right into Tennessee's hands. They're going to be bright and chippy there. And then LSU is going to walk in just bleary eyed. They just got off a bender. And Tennessee, maybe it'll be a cakewalk for Tennessee. Probably not.
I don't know about that. I mean, Jaden Daniels presents some problems. The dude's has a 73% completion percentage so far this season. The 2 games where he needed to run, Florida State was a loss, but he ran for 114 yards, 93 yards against Mississippi State. He is going to be a problem. He's not going to be as hard to tackle as Anthony Richardson, but he might be more elusive. I haven't really watched him play a lot. Obviously, he came from Arizona State. So that's going to be tough. Kayshon Boutte, if he plays, I know he missed this past week because of the birth of his child. But he's battled some injuries over the years, had a big ankle thing last year. When he's healthy, he might be the best wide receiver in the country. So I know this LSU team's down, but it's at LSU. It's not one that you can just kind of take for granted at all. I think it's going to be a really tough game. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Definitely interested to watch them play Auburn this week at Auburn. I think that's another thing that kind of plays to Tennessee's advantage is they play a tough conference game on the road. Are they banged up after that game where Tennessee's a little fresher? And then coming off the bye, Josh Heupel is 6-1 coming off a bye in his career as a head coach. The one loss was a 50-49 loss to Memphis back in 2020, I believe. UCF missed a field goal at the end that would have won that game. So he's not far from being 7-0. And that includes the Kentucky game last year where Tennessee came and beat Kentucky. So I think there's a few things there that do work in Tennessee's favor as far as the game time, the way Hypel prepares his team coming off of an off week, and just the game that LSU will come out of. Because I think that Auburn team, while they're almost lost to Missouri, they're not a great team. I think LSU will beat them at Auburn, but they do play hard. Brian Harsin is – I don't think he wants to be at Auburn much longer, but he doesn't want to ruin his name to prevent himself from getting another job after Auburn. So he's going to badly want to win in that game. That's one that Auburn really, really needs. So it could be a tough game.
I don't know how it's going to go. That game does feel like one where LSU just like stomps a mud hole into Auburn's chest and then Brian Harsin gets fired. Maybe. I think that's what it would take. I don't think losing to LSU is probably going to get him fired. Because I think that's the likely outcome, but it might. I don't know. But with that said, let's finish with this. We're already at an hour 20, but what's 10 more minutes if you've already gone that long? So Mike Bianchi, who is a blowhard journalist in the Orlando area, and he's written some complete nonsense in the past. He's a guy that he was like, we need to bring Central Florida into the SEC. That's like been his shtick before, so for the most part, he's kind of ridiculous, but he wrote this article taking a big jab at UCF fans after Tennessee beat Florida. And he said, hey, UCF fans, how do you like Josh Heupel now? Because a lot of UCF fans were sort of like, well, he only won 8 games in his last year with us. We're glad to see him go. And then Malzahn hasn't done so hot so far. But then Mike Bianchi says, the Vols never punted in today's victory over the Gators. And yes, I believe Hypel is the greatest offensive mind in college football today in my column. And it's basically all just a giant shot at UCF fans to be like, look at you dummies. You didn't want this guy. I don't care about that part of it. But Hypel, as the greatest offensive mind in college football, I completely agree. I think he is exactly right. And it's going to sound completely biased because we're obviously a very pro-Tennessee podcast here, both Tennessee fans. But I think there's great evidence to this. I mean, first of all, Tennessee's the number one offense in America right now. So start there. You have the most prolific offense in America at the moment. So that sort of speaks for itself. But beyond that, he's doing so much with a set of players that is pretty ragtag. A couple of pretty highly rated recruits, but like a Cedric Tillman, who was a 3-star and did nothing with Pruitt. Suddenly he's a superstar. You know, you have guys like that. Hendon Hooker, who, again, former 3-star recruit, I think, from Virginia Tech, did diddly squat at Virginia Tech, even though he played, just was not even good there, to the point where when he showed up here, people were thinking he wouldn't do much. And Hypel puts it all together out there. And I mean, you just watch that against Florida. Florida's defense is not bad. They're not great. They're certainly not great, but you have pieces out there. Brenton Cox, that linebacker, Ventrell Miller, good pieces. They had zero answer for what Hypel was doing, specifically with Hendon Hooker. I mean, it was like it was a hot knife through butter. It didn't matter what Florida did. They were getting sliced up, and he spreads you out so far, and it's all scheme. It's all scheme. When you really watch it, he spreads you out so far, and Hooker runs that offense so well that, I mean, it just is. I can't say enough about it. Obviously, again, this is going to come off biased, but I don't think who are some of the other guys? Lane Kiffin, I don't think his offense is good. It's good. It is good. It's not as good. Kendall Briles, kind of one of those guys that's in that conversation. Not as good. Just it's not. I don't watch those guys and go like with Hypel's offense. I look and I almost go, I think this guy could take a team, get them against the college football team. It's so effective that it feels like 2010-ish with Gus Malzahn, when he really revolutionized that tempo offense to the point where Nick Saban was wanting to change the rules of college football. Like, he frustrated Saban so much that he wanted to change the rules, and you started getting all that talk. Oh, should tempo be allowed? It's bad for defenses and blah, 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 you know. And eventually a whole bunch of other coaches started kind of copying Malzahn. It feels like this might be going in that direction where other coaches might be looking and go, whoa, look at what they are doing. And this is like effective in a way that you probably would never think it would be in an SEC setting. There's plenty of argument to be made here, but I just think nobody is innovating more than this guy right now. It's crazy.
Well, I think you also, what you brought up there is other teams will look at it, and we've seen Alabama and some of these teams go tempo in some situations. Like Alabama started doing that more towards the end of last year. But why aren't other teams running this if it's so effective? That's the question I've kind of asked myself is, yeah, you run these huge splits where you kind of force a defense to show their hand. Are you going to defend the run? Are you going to load the box and kind of leave these guys in one-on-one coverage? If you are, Tennessee's going to run by you and they're going to throw it deep. Or are you going to leave the middle of the field open? If you do, you're probably going to run the ball there. You know, that's the crux of the offense. And if it's that simple and that effective, why aren't more coaches doing it? And I think it's really hard to implement and to install. I think that's part of it. And I think Josh Heupel, for whatever reason, he just has a way to get these players to buy into it and to do exactly what they're supposed to do. I mean, it takes a lot of discipline to be that on. You cannot take a play off if you're in this Tennessee offense. I mean, I know there's even some plays where you're running at such a fast pace. If you watch his offense, you'll notice every now and then there'll be a receiver far out wide that doesn't even run a route. He just kind of stands there while the play goes to the left side of the field. or maybe it's a running play. And Hypel's fine with that because you got a defender over there with him. You've lessened the amount of defenders on the field by 1 or 2 or whatever the situation is. But even those guys, they got to know where to go. They got to know where to line up. They have to be there really quick. I mean, they have to be locked in every single play. And that not only is it physically exhausting, it's mentally exhausting. So I think the reason we haven't seen as many teams do this is because it's just not that easy to implement. It might seem like a simple offense, and maybe some of the concepts are, but it's not an easy thing to coach and to teach. And Hypel, with the Golish and Joey Hasley and Glenn Ellerby, the offensive line coach, you've got a group of guys that they're on the same page. Mm-hmm. And they're all preaching the same message to these guys. There's no confusion on who's supposed to do what. I think that's part of what makes it so effective and why we haven't seen that many copycat instances of it.
And it really takes guts. Like, it takes a certain type of coach to even want to attempt something like that, because he's so relentless with the system, Hypel, where to the point where in certain situations you go like, okay, it's all right if you don't put this drive together in 30 seconds and then you have to punt. Like, you take your time. It'll be okay. Take your time, But he's doing it his way. And there's a lot of coaches that won't do that. I kind of feel like Napier might be he might be a candidate for needing an offense like that, because he's just a balls to the wall guy, apparently. But
I think that's part of his problem too, is I don't believe he has a play caller. I think he's calling his own plays, and I'm not sure that for his situation where he's brought in so many different voices, it's not like Hypel where it was just like a mass, moving from UCF. The offensive side of the staff was pretty much all the same guys. He hasn't quite done that. So there's a real thing about continuity. Like, we've talked about it a lot when Jeremy Pruitt was here, but that is massive for a program. You get like the same message year after year. It means a lot. I mean, when you're constantly changing your system or changing just the voice that you're hearing calling plays and the way that they call plays. I mean, these guys develop a bond with each other. They get to a point where they kind of know. And then Hooter knows what Alex Golish is going to want. He knows what Josh Heupel is going to want in that situation. They can kind of communicate it without speaking. You can't, and there's no substitute for that at all. And that's part of why I think Tennessee's been successful early under Josh Heupel, is he came to Tennessee kind of with that continuity with his staff. So it made it a lot easier to translate that to the players.
And it's just such a clear identity. You see so many new coaches. I think Napier is one of these guys, like you're saying. So many coaches that with the offense, you just go, what are you even doing? Like, yeah, some of this works, some of it doesn't. Some of you're doing one thing here and another thing there, and you just go like, what do you want to do? Like, choose a lane and be.
Well, that was part of the problem with Pruitt and Butch, is there was no identity at all. Yeah. There was no, like, you never knew. I remember year 3 of Tennessee under Butch, it's like, what is this? What is this team? Like, what is their identity? What do they want to be? Are they trying to run the ball down people's throat? Are they just high-flying offense? Like, it never really made sense. It was mostly just Josh Dobbs running around when the play broke down and making something spectacular happen. But with this Tennessee offense, like, their identity. You know what they're going to do. You know there's going to be a wide receiver streaking down the field wide open at some point in the first quarter, and they're going to take the shot, and it's going to be this moment that gets everybody on their feet. Like, you know what to expect and what they're going to be every time they're out there.
That's the primary thing about I make so far, is that everybody always says with like running quarterbacks, people are like, oh, well, they figured him out. They figured out the running Lamar Jackson or whoever that gets said about, oh, they finally figured out how to, but like, Hypel's been running this for years now. Nobody's figured it out. There's no just like, oh, well, we did this and then it stopped them. That hasn't, the closest thing was just Georgia last year, where they just overwhelm you with incredibly superior talent. Like, that was as good as you could really hope for. There's something like that. And then I think a big piece of it, when it hasn't worked for Hypel so far, is his teams shooting themselves in the foot. Like you saw against that was the entire thing against Pittsburgh this year, is just situations like that. Like, those things can happen that will stop this offense. But if this thing's running efficiently like it was against Florida, there is no stopping it. There was nothing that Florida could do. that was going to stop that offense. There was always wide receivers open, and then they hit you, they run up to the ball, and then they they'll run the ball, and then that catches you off guard. And like it doesn't matter what you do. There is just no single thing that's going to snap outside of having unbelievably superior talent. There's nothing that's going to just flip and give you the ability to stop this. And that's another thing that's just so insane about it. I do two Big Ten Jeffs credit. I don't know if he's still watching. Ryan Day is certainly right there, but I always, it's kind of like having a Heisman conversation about like Bryce Young, where I go, is Bryce Young truly great? Or is it just the dudes that play around him are all 7-star players coached by the greatest college football coach of all time? With Ryan Day, I kind of go, is it that amazing? Or is it just Jackson Smith and Jigba? CJ Stroud is incredible. Just all of this stuff where to Ryan Day's credit, he recruited these guys. To Ryan Day's credit, he's just working with an incredible set of players that are from number 2, number 3 recruiting classes in America. And Hypel is doing this with just a patchwork of guys. And a year ago had a roster of less than 70 dudes at one point, and he's still making that offense work. And that's why it's all of that makes me go like, right now, nobody is doing it better than this guy. And just think about what this might look like with 5-star players in the system. That's the thing that I think should be scary to anybody else in college football right now, is like, what if this dude gets the players that are, absolutely generational talents? That's got to be scary, like a Nico Iamaleava probably. Like, that's got to be horrifying. Especially if you're like a Kentucky, somebody like that, you're probably looking and going, oh boy, they're finally getting it figured out. What am I going to do? He beat me in that first year. What am I going to do when he actually gets players in here? And that's going to be
I'll tell you what Mark Stoops is going to do. He's going to leave Kentucky. Yes. I've been waiting on it I don't think that's going to happen, but every off season I've been waiting on him to leave Kentucky because he's a good coach. Like, I think Mark Stoops is a really good coach. Like, you cannot deny what he's done at Kentucky has been impressive, but he's hit his ceiling at Kentucky. And that's because it's Kentucky. Like, that's just the way it's going to be. If he wants to win a national championship or even have a shot at a national championship, he's going to have to leave Kentucky. And I don't know where he ends up. Who knows? I mean, I thought Florida State job would be open, but maybe it's not going to be now. Regardless, I do think that is what Mark Stoops will do. And then Kentucky will go. Then Kentucky will go right back to where they were when Joker Phillips was there and all this other guy. That's who he took over for, isn't it?
Yes.
God, I can't believe it's been that long ago. He's one of the longest tenured coaches in the SEC at this point, which is kind of wild to think about.
Yeah, because it's 9 wins. C's get degrees, baby. 9 wins will do it for you at Kentucky. They have Florida, higher standards for basketball.
That's what's the crazy thing about Florida is Dan Mullen got tossed out after a 9-win season or something.
One bad year.
Yeah.
Well, regardless, it's I don't know every single offensive coach in America. There's a ton of offensive coordinators that I have no idea who they are and who's out there. But you just look at Hypel's contemporaries, and I personally do not see anybody doing more with less, innovating more, running schemes that throw off defenses more regularly and in the same types of ways. Again, to go back, like, defenses can try these things, but there's only so much that you can do. And he just goes, come and stop it. And they just can't. Like, it is a crazy, relentless attacking system that nobody else is doing right now in the same way that this guy is doing it. So in my personal opinion, I agree with Mike Bianchi here. I think he is the greatest offensive mind in college football at the moment. That might change. It might change. But right now, I think he's that guy. And it's crazy that Tennessee has walked into this. I think it's credit to everybody that made those administrative decisions, but it's no coincidence that Danny White is here. And then this is showing up for you now.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm quite ready to make that bold of a proclamation. It's not that I don't think Hypel is. It's just that it's such a broad conversation but I think he's in the conversation of like the top 3 without a doubt. And maybe he is number 1. Again, there's I'm sure there's different numbers and things you can pull up that might suggest otherwise. Not everybody's always going to agree on that, but yeah, he's right there to me. And I know people point to his time at UCF and kind of how, man, I don't think it was necessarily going backward. I think they had some bad luck in 2020. They had a lot of players that didn't play because of COVID, not to make it excuses for him, but he's going to continue to evolve and get better. And I think we're seeing the offense get better. I mean, the Josh Heupel in 2018 is not going to be the same as Josh Heupel in 2024 and 25. He's going to continue to evolve and get better. And we've seen that this year. We've seen Tennessee do some things differently than they did last year. We've seen them have answers for the way teams are defending them. I mean, they come out, Ball State comes out, plays a really soft coverage. We watched that game and we're like, well, Tennessee kind of struggled to get going. And then you're like, oh, well, they scored 59 points though at the same time. Like, did they really struggle? Like, we've already become kind of spoiled by this high-flying offense that if he doesn't score 60 points, you're like, well, what's going on here? I mean, that's the sign of progress some extent. So it's really amazing to think about, and it's really fascinating to me just the way he's completely flipped the whole thing so quickly. I'm really interested in like the behind the scenes stuff of how he has made this work, because there's certainly a lot of hard work that's gone into it from him and his staff.
Absolutely. All credit to them. You beat Florida. Just keep on winning. That's the key. Winning heals all wounds. It doesn't, even the crazy PTSD that Tennessee fans have. You got me believing, that never happened with Pruitt. It never happened with Butch. It never happened with Dooley. And you got me, at least again for the moment. Let's do it. I've been looking for those red flags and can't find him. I think he's probably the most innovative offensive coach in America right now. And that's a great formula. So keep it up. That's it. Just go win. That's all I gotta say. Don't make me have to have these annoying conversations that we've always had about Tennessee football coaches, and we're all good. So there's that. This is, I think, our longest episode ever. But we got people hanging.
That's what that's what beating Florida does.
Oh, that is absolutely true. I mean, we never have more engagement, viewers, anything like that than in a week like this. It's the best. Like having an imploding program like the Titans right now, that gets a certain type of viewership, and it gets a lot of viewership, but it's not the same as something like this where this is recurring viewership. When things are imploding, it's like 2 weeks, we're going to talk about fire the coach, blah, blah, blah. And then people sort of tune out. They don't want to hear it anymore. With this, who doesn't want to hear about a winning team that's doing great things? So please, Josh Heupel, don't make me talk about Tennessee losing.
Not even going to think about it.
Please and thank you. We will leave it there. Amazing show. Thank you to everybody who watched, who tuned in. You guys rock. There's I did get during the middle of that show. I was told to work this in about Superbook Sports. They sent it to me after I already did the ad read, but they have a new ad read for us. So back to Superbook Sports to end here. Can you beat Vegas? This football season? Superbook Sports gives you the chance every week to go head-to-head with the best odds makers in Vegas. No fancy computer algorithms, no guys across the pond setting lines for American sports, just the best team of odds makers in the business behind the counter at Superbook in Las Vegas. Plus, Superbook features some of the best odds boosts and promo bets anywhere. Download the Superbook Sports app or visit superbook.com and start your battle against Vegas right now. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. I already said it earlier in the show. Download that and get in on the action. Support them because they're supporting us. Cannot appreciate everybody watching more. Subscribe to the YouTube. Subscribe on the podcast networks. On the A to Z Sports Podcast Network is the name of the show, where you'll find us on Spotify and Apple. I love this right here. Michael Allen said, been listening to your podcast for a year. First time getting to tune in live. So glad you got to see us. Michael, that's awesome. We really appreciate you. It means the world in a week like this where everybody's so hyped. It's just so fun. So Yeah, that's I think that is it. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Ragan. At Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT on the social medias. You know where you're watching at this point in this show. You know where to find us. A to Z sports.com. Yada, yada, yada. It's the bye week, Zach. We made it. We're going to go take a week off. So we're not going to take a week off. We'll be back next Monday at 4 p.m. We'll be back then breaking down the LSU game, telling you everything you need to know about Tennessee sports. And we'll talk to everybody. Next week.
See you guys later.
Get yourself a girl, boy. And if it's money you need,